Hi, I'm Robbin Miller, host of Miller Chat. Today we're going to do something different, and I'm going to turn it over to Paula Denoncourt.
Okay, so I'm interviewing Robbin today on women, girls, and baseball and the history of it. And Robbin wrote a beautiful book on girls' dream to play Little League with the boys, breaking the barriers. So we're going to talk a little bit about the history of baseball and girls and women and how far we've come. Where did we start? I mean, it probably goes way back to the 1800s, I believe, but when did it, you're going to talk about it, but when did it come into leagues and professional baseball and all that? So I'm looking forward to interviewing Robbin today. So, I didn't know a lot about this.
Neither did I.
So I think it's going to be very fascinating to learn about how far we've come as women and girls and role models and playing with the boys in baseball. So playing with the big boys.
Yes, big boys.
So before we talk about your book, Robbin, do share about girls and women and the history of baseball. Where did it start? Like, was it the 1800s? You tell us.
Well, I appreciate this opportunity to talk about girls and women in baseball. Like I said, I played, but in the 1970s, I didn't have the luxury or the role modeling of girls or women who played.
Right.
The history that I'm sharing today, I just learned in the last few years about it because now there's more of a resurgence for girls and women in baseball and Little League. So what I did some research on girls, women in baseball. Mm-hmm. And I'm only going to speak for the United States because there's just so much other history we can share, but it won't, in the time we have, we won't be able to do that. I found about the Bloomer Girls, and somebody wrote a book about the Bloomer Girls, and they talked about, well, before they even had the Bloomer Girls, there's controversy today about baseball. It's like, who really discovered it? Was it Abner Doubleday, or was it somebody else? So that came about where men started playing their baseball games, 1860s and so on. And then what happened from there, they started to have a group of girls and women just play for the baseball owners. They weren't technically bloomer girls yet. They were entertainers. And basically, like advertisement, when it comes to baseball and entertainment, you can use your imagination that many people went to game, maybe not to watch the girls and maybe to, but they were there to see what they look like.
Almost like a cheerleader type thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they were paid to be entertainers. I don't believe what I read that their goal really was to promote women in baseball. It was more of an entertainment. And then later on in the late 1860s, 70s, we had Bloomer Girls play, where they wore these bloomers, these big, look like balloons on their legs.
Right, yeah,
right?
I remember those. Yeah.
Right, petticoats, and I think bloomers came, right?
Yeah.
And they had where they weren't really organized as a league, but it was a bunch of girls and women who went from like town to town to play, which I thought that was quite interesting. And they were paid, and they had to have one man on the team playing.
Oh, wow. And
what I learned recently is Roger Hornsby, a famous baseball player, was on one of the teams.
Interesting.
So I thought that was quite interesting. And so I wanted to just share that about that. But let's note, people out there, is that when girls and women were playing baseball back then, they had to still prove they were feminine.
Oh, okay. Got you.
They had to be perceived and believed by societal expectations that they were girls and women. Traditional. Okay. A little different today.
Oh, yeah.
So girls and women had expectations, and note, it wasn't for the men and boys who played. They had to be the good girls. Okay. What happened in the early 1920s, 30s, it stopped playing. The bloomers, eventually the Bloomer Girls got regular uniforms.
Okay.
But interest waned. Things changed. World War II came about, and the men of baseball went to fight overseas, and there was no more baseball. He saw a league of our own. That's what happened. So you had girls, women, were recruited. The baseball commissioner at that time wanted to have baseball, to promote baseball. So from 1943, it started the American Girl, imagine, American Girl Professional Association. Why not women, right?
Right.
And girls and women had to show their feminine side by wearing those short skirts. And they had to live in a big house with a chaperone. And they had to be good girls, good women. Remember the movie, League of Their Own? Prim and proper,
Yeah.
right? But as we all know from baseball history, the famous baseball players of Babe Ruth and other players back then, they were able to do whatever they wanted,
Right.
you know? No sin on that.
Mm-hmm.
But girls were, and women were carefully watched over. And of course, they rode on buses from town to town. They started off with 4 teams, like the Rockford Peaches in Chicago, and then they ended up going up to 10 teams.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. World War II ended, and then people still went to the game, but 1954 it just stopped.
Okay.
People went back to playing. Now, before I go on further, I just wanted to say that they had African American League back then too, before Jackie Robinson integrated in 1948. And I wanted to give credit to the famous women, who played back then, because I think their credit is finally due. I wanted to talk about Efra Manley was the first African American to own a team.
Oh, wow.
The African American team. She was the owner, and she's the first African American woman to be in the Hall of Fame.
Okay.
Actually, there's a book about her. This is like the 1930s. And then you had Mamie Peanut Johnson, the only woman to ever pitch in the African American League. And then what I learned recently was Toni Stone. She replaced Hank Aaron in the 1950s when Hank Aaron got recruited to play Major League Baseball.
I was going to say what year, so it was in the
1950s.
50s. Okay.
She was 1950s. Efra Manley was in the 1930s. And Toni Stone was called they called her like a tomboy while she was growing up.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to give credit where it's due.
Right, yeah.
About African American women where they played, because again, I didn't know any of this growing up.
I don't believe we were taught this in history.
I was taught African American
Right?
history,
Yeah.
but I didn't learn about women, African American women playing baseball.
No.
I knew about Jackie Robinson.
I didn't know any of this.
So it's pretty interesting,
Yeah.
the history of that. To be good role models, too. Now, before I move ahead, I don't kid you that it probably wasn't easy for these women and girls to play baseball.
Right.
Because they had to be prim and proper, but they probably were, jeered, hooted, who knows what, flirted with. People were harassed, yeah. And they had to take it. You had to take it. There was no sexual harassment laws back then.
No.
So just keep that in mind, okay? And how it took a long time for this to be noticed in 2000, and then Efra Manley, I believe, about 10 years ago or so, finally got into Hall of Fame. Here we're talking, 70 years later?
That's, incredible.
So moving forward to the 1950s, there was the Tubby Rule. And actually this woman, I forgot her name.
Is it Kay?
Yes, Kay.
Kay.
Kay was her first name. Yes. She was one of the first women to play, but she dressed up as a boy in Little League in the 1950s.
So she used the name Tubby, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That was her nickname.
Yeah.
Yes, that was her nickname. And she made believe she was a boy when she played in the 1950s. And then the second year she said she was a girl, and then they kicked her out. And again, I just learned this recently, and it's now in the Little League museum, the history of that. I didn't know about the Tubby Rule. The Tubby Rule was that no girls ought to play in Little League. That was it. No ifs, ands, or buts. So I am happy to say that over the years, she was able to throw out the first pitch at Major League Baseball games.
Okay, so it's Major League Baseball. I know, yes.
In the 1990s or so. Here we are, again, 40 years later.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, amazing. Absolutely amazing. She said she was harassed, too, when they found out she was a girl. But somehow the boys, I guess, maybe not, didn't notice. I don't know. We'll find out. And I think Disney now has her copyrights to do the movie.
So that'd be an interesting movie to see.
That will be an interesting movie.
Yeah.
To see. And then moving right along, we move along to the 1970s.
Okay.
okay? That's when I started to play. And I remember I started playing in 1974 with my father and my mother. We lived in Bayside, Queens. We were, we were going to a family picnic back then. I mean, who knew about ticks and all that? You just put the blanket on and sat.
I know.
And I remember I saw a little baseball game playing. I said, oh, that's pretty cool. So I wanted to learn. And I remember I got my interest into it. And then I was told in 1974 that girls weren't allowed to play. And I said, what? 1970? I said, what? Women's liberation? Where's that all going? Women's rights? I guess, right? But there was a case in New Jersey by a girl by the name of Marie Pepe. She wanted to play in New Jersey, and she couldn't, and went to the New Jersey court, and the Supreme Court ruled she could play, and then from there, that further liberated in a law passed December 31st, by the way, 1974 by President Ford. It took a U.S. president to sign the law that girls can play. Not ridiculous? Totally ridiculous. Unfortunately, Marie Pepper couldn't play because by then she was too old because Little League ends at 12.
God.
But I remember that case, and her picture is, this is her right here. From New Jersey, and that's another woman, Caroline King, I guess, played also. I don't remember that case, but I know she's getting credit too, up here.
Okay.
So, as you see the history, how there had to be court cases.
Wow.
Court cases. And the girls got to play Little League, and you know what the argument was by the court? It was the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment was passed to prohibit slavery, to end slavery.
Okay.
They used the Equal Rights Clause to argue that girls have the right, equal right as men, boys, to play baseball.
Wow.
So it was based on that. Again, I didn't know that until now.
Well, let me just share something with you really quick.
Go
I
ahead.
don't want to take too much of your
Go
time.
ahead.
But fast forward in the 80s, I was going to high school, and they started to do co-ed gym classes.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
Okay. Well, we were supposed to play, I think it was flag football, co-ed. All of a sudden, they decided, oh no, this is too rough.
Too rough?
Yeah, but and the
Oh.
other sport was field hockey. Tell me that's not too rough. But they said, oh no, this is too rough for the girls. So then they split us back up again, and it wasn't co-ed no more. Now that was really illegal. It was supposed to start being co-ed.
Equal Rights Clause.
Right, in the 80s. So I just think it's interesting. So even in the 80s, even though, it was just a gym class, they said, nope, we're not mixing it. And I did not like field hockey. So I kept playing the flag football till they forced me. Then they forced me to play field hockey. They're like, nope, girls over here, boys over here. But they weren't supposed to do that, So I think it's interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Even in the 80s, they were still trying to do that. The boys again, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, it was probably 1982, maybe 83. I graduated in 85. Don't mind saying it. High school. So probably around 82, 83, somewhere around there. I was either sophomore and junior. And so now, you're just talking about all this history of baseball. I'm like, wow, even in the 80s, they were still like, they didn't want to to mix it up. This is only flag football. Like, oh, that's too rough. But field hockey was worse. You got your shins beat up and everything else. So I just thought it was interesting.
I didn't get to play, but I remember softball. I do remember that.
That was terrible.
I think we did just play girls and boys, yeah. Well, it's like in the 1950s, the Board of Education, Brown, when they integrated the schools, there was still segregation in the school. They couldn't be on sports or something like that. So it's just people have really bad attitudes.
Right, yeah. So even in the 80s, they were still going against the law.
Yeah.
Because that was the law, and that's why they did it to begin with. And then they were just like, nope, we're not doing it. Just on their own.
Oh. How interesting. Well, thank you for sharing that. I didn't know
I
that.
just thought it was interesting. Like, it just shows you where, I don't even know where we're at now in schools as far as, like, what are they making kids play and what are they,
I think it's together.
Co-ed.
Well, my son
Should be
in
co-ed.
public school said they play together.
Yeah. I mean,
I
I
can't
don't
say
know
for the high
what
school.
they're playing. Are they playing softball? Are they playing
Wiffle ball,
wiffle ball? Okay.
basketball, running.
Yeah. Yeah, we did basketball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Anyway, I just thought that was interesting.
Well, as a segue, let's talk about the 1990s
Mm-hmm.
until now.
Okay.
Okay, so people asked the question, what happened in the 1990s? I don't know if people know, but in the 1990s, let's see, I have a picture here or not, they formed a baseball team called the Colorado Silver Bullets that was managed by the Negro brothers, Phil and Joe Negro. They were famous players of the pitchers of the 70s and 80s. And unfortunately, the women who did play were all softball players.
Okay.
And they didn't have any women who played baseball, which is pretty interesting. So that only lasted a few years. Again, it was a team that went around, from town to town kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that stopped.
Yeah.
And then what I learned recently is that we did have a woman who, her name is Isla Borders, who played in the Independent Baseball League. She played for the St. Louis Saints.
Oh, wow.
The owner is Bill Veck's son. Bill Veck owns the Chicago White Sox. So his
Okay.
son owned this team. And it was in the 90s, and she played as a pitcher. And she was paid hardly anything.
Mm-hmm.
This was like minor league ball or whatever it was. The next step was whatever the next level was. Some didn't go on to professional baseball. But she was never offered a contract, and she did face harassment. There were actually some managers that didn't want her to play and didn't want the team to play because there was a woman on the team, which is totally ridiculous.
Yep.
It's like, wake up. And she wrote
Yeah.
a book called Making My Pitch. And it was a very good book. I'm very glad I read it. And then 2011, now we're talking the modern era,
Right.
Justine Siegel, whose website I told you about, www.baseballforall.org, she was the first woman who threw batting practice for the A's, Indians, Rays, Cardinals, Astros, and Mets. But she was not offered a contract.
Mm-hmm.
But she did, before she was able to try out for the team, she did coach first base for the Brockton Rocks, and she made her first female coach. She was the first female coach to work for men's professional baseball team.
Wow.
So I just learned about that recently, Justine
And that
Siegel.
was
2011.
2011.
She was one of the
wow.
first women to actually get the chance to go batting practice, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And then prior to that, she made records coaching a minor league team, Brockton Rocks, which is the part of that Canadian team where they used to have the Worcester Tornado.
Okay. Yep.
So, and then she was one of the first female to coach baseball. And then she made history in 2015 when the Oakland A's announced it has hired her to serve as a guest instructor.
Okay.
So that's what women have gone far. Okay, so she's one of the
right.
first to try out, but not offered a contract, but to coach a minor league and team. I guess it's independent leagues, and
Yeah, because we have no women on any of the big leagues, like not Red Sox, not.
I
You know what I mean? Yeah.
I don't know because she runs a nonprofit. What she was saying that she's involved with the baseball tournaments, promoting women and girls. They have baseball tournaments when women's teams go around play.
Yeah.
They have a couple this summer, one in Rockford, Illinois, Rockford Peaches,
Yeah.
and then one in New Jersey called the Maria Pepe Invitational. And surprisingly, maybe I'm not surprised. Our counterparts in other countries, Japan, Korea, have women baseball teams.
Right. That's what I'm
Canada.
saying. Like we've never had a woman on the Red
Yeah.
Sox. We've never, you know what I
Right.
mean? It's nothing I've ever, I've never really even thought about it. It's like that's kind of weird. You know what I mean? Like football too.
Yeah, but we do have a women's basketball team and ice
Yeah.
hockey. We'll get there eventually.
So
And-
weird. Yeah.
and
Never
up-
really thought about it.
And up to the modern era, we had Monet Davis, 12. She pitched 3 years ago in Little League Baseball through a shutout.
Mm-hmm.
So she also likes basketball, but she's still playing senior league, which is now 60 feet to pitch as opposed to 46 inches to pitch. So she's now still pitching for the senior league.
Okay.
So moving right along, before I get into my book, I just wanted to say that 5 girls have pitched in the World Series. 18 girls have played in the Little League World Series as of 2015.
Mm-hmm.
No high school girls baseball team yet.
Okay.
There is one girl playing a high school team somewhere in the country, and a few have made the college team.
Mm-hmm.
Again, very far and very few. Very far and few between.
Wow.
Okay. And the book that I got that information on was from Jennifer Ring's book called Game of Their Own.
Okay.
So, getting back to my book.
Yes, let's talk about your book and why did you write your book, and maybe you want to read a passage from your book.
Sure.
Well,
like I was saying, 1974 I was told I couldn't play, and then 1975 I did play. And I was one of 4 girls. There were 2 girls in the minor league, which was 9 and up, 10, 11, 12, and then we had a Texan league, 8 and 9. My brother played that.
Mm-hmm.
And there was only 2 girls in the minor league and 2 in the Texan league. And I really thought when the law was passed, I was so naive as a 10-year-old city kid. I thought it would be easy. It wasn't. I was harassed, I was jeered, I was booed, I was called names, told to go home, told to play with dolls. It was unbelievable.
Wow.
But because I was a city girl, and the city had issues because of the social dynamics that were going on during the time of the social time, so to speak. We had to be tough to protect yourself. I was able to withstand that. I was resilient to that. I didn't let that all put me down.
So you built a tough shell.
I built it. I dealt with the shame and I dealt with the vulnerability, but just keep going.
Good for you.
Self-determination because of the environment I was in as a city girl, where you had to know how to defend yourself against extenuating circumstances. So that helped me get through it, even now. And I got this trophy because I was a girl. It says Bayside Little League, 1975, first place in our hearts.
That's awesome.
Because I was a girl.
Congratulations.
Yes. And like a lot of the women who did play or girls, people wondered if they were still female. I had that with me too. Am I still a girl? Am I still female? I'm like, yeah, I am.
Right, yeah.
What does it have to do with it? And this is the picture of my first year.
Aw.
And then over here, second and third that I played.
Yeah.
And this is the mitt that I used in my 3rd year. My father coached the team. American-made gloves, still in good shape 40-something years later.
Wow.
Played first base because I was tall. So I wrote this book right here based on my experience for 1 year. Some people said, well, why didn't you write about the last 2 years that you played? I said, well, because that would take away what the story was about. So I just wanted to read a passage, the introduction that says, my name is Robbin Miller, and this is my story. I played baseball with boys from 1975 to 1977. However, this was not always possible. That's because girls were not allowed to play Little League Baseball until the late 1974. It took several court cases and a U.S. president to sign a new law before girls were allowed to play the game alongside boys. Prior to the signing of this law, girls and women either played in their own leagues or in the minor leagues with men. Sometimes women's baseball careers were cut short due to society's expectation what a woman was supposed to do in those days. I consider myself a pioneer because I rose to the challenge of becoming one of 4 girls who played Little League Baseball in Bayside, Queens, New York in the boys' league. I learned that being calm and collected built the self-confidence I needed to face the verbal abuse I received from the crowd and from fellow boy players in Little League. I also learned how outside influences such as struggling in school and troubles with friends resulted in poor performance, causing a setback in my baseball career. However, working hard toward a comeback is the sweetest accomplishment. It's a valuable lesson for any young person to learn during their formative years. When I tell my story to others, their facial expressions reflect utter disbelief at the meanness that was directed at me during this game. It was not just the kids. Adults played their part in trying to discourage me from my goal.
That's amazing, Robin. What comes to mind when you read that, not just about baseball, it's facing challenges and really learning to stick up for yourself. I hear the word bullying and things like that.
Right,
and I know you've been an advocate for it. You've got to get that book in schools, you know what I mean? And really get people to read it, whether you do some sort of a talk about it and tell people your story. So anyone out there, if you know somewhere that Robin can maybe do a talk about her book like she just did today, I think that book, it's way more than about baseball.
Yeah, it is.
It really is. So, You know, give her how do we contact you is probably our next segment anyways. So give your information, because I can really see you go into classrooms and talking about this, that it really ties in with kids being bullied, and it is time to stick up for yourself, especially, you know, there's transgender kids out there, and there's all this stuff that goes on that people think they can't do something, and it's about baseball, but that and more.
Well, yeah, because back in the day, in the 70s, like the women who played before me and girls, you had to just take it. You know, people were booing and jeering, and you just took it.
Yeah.
You had to have tough skin. And that's important today, because they say a lot of this generation of kids, they're not learning that.
I got picked on. I was a very sickly child, because as you know, I'm a health coach. I've been on the show several times.
Yes, of course.
I was a sickly child. I had asthma and allergies, and so gym class was just pure hell for me. There's just no other way to put it. I couldn't run around, and I couldn't do a lot, so I was always picked on because I couldn't do anything, you know. I would be like, please don't throw the ball to me, I don't want to run, because I'd have an asthma attack.
Did you have to take it up? You had to take it,
I
right?
had to take it.
You had to take it, not
I had
melt
to
like a
take it.
marshmallow.
Yep.
If you melted as a marshmallow, they just picked on you more.
Right.
But kids today need to learn to have tough skin. Not to say they can't express their emotions.
Right.
We're not saying that, and I'm not saying you should be a bully.
No.
It's learning how to defend yourself without melting like a marshmallow.
Right.
I mean, if you melt like a marshmallow, that's fine too.
And do what, you know, whatever it is you enjoy doing. Never mind what society tells you can do.
Right.
And, you know, and be that role model for someone else.
Yep.
You know, and you are, you know, who's to say what society tells us what to do? You know, that's our problem. We always conform to what society tells us what to do, even with food.
Yep.
Constantly.
That's right.
You know, we grew up eating a certain types of food. Well, we'll still stick to that. It's like, why can't you think outside the box and try something new?
Right.
So,
well, this
anyway,
book is on sale at Amazon.com or Pennant Publication. I have a Facebook page called Girls Dream to Play Little League Baseball.
Oh, that's awesome.
My email is rmillerchat@aol.com. And I appreciate Paula Denoncourt, who's a holistic health food coach,
Yes.
for taking the time out of her busy day to come and interview me about this book. I really appreciate it.
Well, I was happy to be here, Robin. Happy to do it for you. And like I said, I learned a lot today from this. And like I said, it feels like it's just so much more than just baseball. So I hope you get this book out there to classrooms and kids, and let them realize it's more than just about baseball. That's only a piece of it. Yeah.
Well,
Thank you.
You're welcome. This has been another episode of Miller Chat. Good night. Thank you.